And welcome back to another sizzling episode of Because Money. My name is Kyle Prevo, and with me as always are Sandy Martin and Jackson Middleton. We're joined this week by Chris Enns from the site Rags to Reasonable. Chris' writing is surpassed only by his Trudeau-esque good looks and angelic opera voice. Thanks for joining us, Chris. Today we're talking generational warfare. Who had it harder, and why we might need to adjust our metrics and perspective because that argument is only slightly insane. So, Chris, we chatted a little bit a couple weeks ago just about how a different lifestyle doesn't necessarily need to be worse or better when compared to those that came before. It can be maybe just as rewarding in a different way. Is that sort of characterize what we were chatting about?
It totally is. Yeah. I think that sometimes the conversation gets really simplified, and you start to look at just a few different metrics to determine what you want your life to look like. And I think the conversation on money is a big one. If you have a net worth of blank, if you are making blank, then you will be living, a fulfilling life. When really that's not connected, or it doesn't necessarily have to be connected. People want different kinds of lives. Financially, the needs of every one of those lives is different. So why don't we start with the question of that, and then build in the financial needs after instead of in reverse.
And I guess why we thought Chris would be a great guy to talk about this, maybe just talk a little bit about your background, Chris, because it's kind of unique as far as personal finance bloggers go.
Yeah, I am not in a field that generally is known for its money wisdom. I grew up on a farm in Manitoba, so Kyle and I have that Manitoba connection. All the best people come from Manitoba, and then a lot of them leave. But I kind of fell into an opera career randomly. People ask me how that happened, and I don't really know, but it happened. And somehow I've spent the last 10 years training and studying and singing opera. Artists don't have the best rap as far as financial know-how, and that's earned on a certain extent, and at the same time it's something that I think we get some bad press. The starving artist is an easier thing to sell than the veteran actor who pays off their mortgage. It's less of a sexy headline. But I came to it basically the way you would think, by doing everything wrong and everything. Like, I knew nothing about money and just started to do it wrong, not epically, but just by making 1,000 little mistakes that end up with CRA calling and telling you that apparently you have to, pay all the taxes, which you can't avoid.
No one deducted
apparently
from your
everybody
check.
has to do that.
And no one deducted
from my check.
Right, Chris?
Exactly, and nobody kind of explained that. And so then I started to look at it, and I started to learn about kind of the nitty-gritties of it, and I randomly fell in love with personal finance, and have just kind of really developed a passion for how these little basics and how learning a few things about money, how money works, how money can be structured, can really be freeing. Even in a lifestyle where, admittedly, my goal is not to be rich. I don't really care about amassing a huge net worth. I'm really interested in building up enough money and a structure that can support the lifestyle that I've chosen. But the basics are the same. It doesn't matter what the goal is. The basics are the same. It's watching what you have. It's making sure that you're investing in a broader sense, not just investing in the sense that, in the market, in ways that you can grow over the long term, but how do you want to invest your money in the short term? How do you want to invest your time in the short term? And how, that benefits. I think one of the conversations that really we start limiting on is the fact that benefits are so much more than financial, right? Like the things that you get out of an investment of time and money, you can't just limit that to, oh, I got a 6% return, oh, I got a 10% return. It's like you're not just building a net worth, you're building a life. And I think that's one thing you want to talk about, generational warfare. I think that's one of the things that really characterizes the millennial generation. We're interested in trying to find different ways to build our lives because certain avenues have been closed to us.
Although I would say, I think probably if we could put ourselves 40 years into the past, I imagine that our parents, I mean, if it's even worthwhile to segregate people into silos based on when they were born, like, oh, you were born in this silo, so therefore you're this type of person. But probably everybody, when they really think about their own personal situation, is thinking about, I want to find meaning in my life, and it just so happened maybe that it kind of an easy shorthand is in the past. It usually looked like, or often looked like, a career with a pension, and then you found it kind of in other ways. We have the opportunity. We have more tools, I would say, in the internet-connected generation, right? Yeah. We have more tools. We have different ways of doing that. So whether those things are gone or they died because of this, new generation coming up, I think it's an opportunity rather than it's something to bemoan.
Yeah, well, I mean, 100%. Like when you look at the raw facts of this, there's really no debate about sort of the raw monetary facts and the cost of things, and I've had many of these debates that I'm sure have changed a lot of minds with boomer relatives and friends. And look, if your path to success is defined as sort of a getting a minimal level of education to get into a corporate job and then purchasing a house, it's much harder. There's no denying this. Like, it's, especially if you live in one of Canada's urban centers, it's an order of magnitude exponentially more difficult than it was in the 60s and 70s. But would I trade any of that difficulty for not having the internet? Not on your life, I wouldn't. I would be like, oh, what's that ridiculous movie with blue guys and they have that connection to animals? Got like everyone in the world saw it.
Avatar.
And they have like that connection to nature. I feel like that connection is like the internet for me. Like, I'm hooked, I'm mainframe to it. And I didn't even grow up with a cell phone. So if that's me, I can't even imagine like today's generation's like living in the Matrix. They don't have a connection to it. Yeah. They're actually just seeing the world in ones and zeros. I don't know. But I wouldn't trade it. So that's like lifestyle versus you have to judge. It's hard to judge apples and oranges, and if you judge each generation by the current generation's metrics, you're like, oh man, your life was brutal. Like, it just doesn't add up.
So is it even so one of the things that sparked this kind of conversation, or this is a continuation of a previous conversation, is many of us were at a conference last week, and Rob Carrick, who of course our listeners probably are familiar with at the Globe and Mail, stood up, and as the very first address of the conference was Rob talking about what he would like personal finance writers to pay attention to. And one of them was, and I really respect Rob, but this is not like a, Rob Carrick is wrong kind of episode, but one of the things he said was we need to pay attention to the fact that people need to write more about the fact that millennials have it worse off than previous generations. And so I was just, one of the questions I had, and I think maybe we're just going to think through out loud, is it even worth paying attention to that when, as writers or as people who give advice? Is our advice supposed to be, hey, you young people, you have it worse off because you have lower incomes and you have higher cost of living and you don't have a defined benefit pension plan, so you should kind of orient your life in ways to kind of create those things for yourself? That's the goal, is to have those, even though they're not really around, the goal is to have something like those because that's the standard. Is it even a productive conversation to advise people in that direction? I don't know. Is it?
I'm going to just say no. I don't know. Good. Like, from my experience, my dad was a railroader, teamster. 30 years as a locomotive engineer.
Man's man.
Absolutely. He went to work. He worked hard. My dad was a great example of what it was to be that. And then to have his, I remember the day when he realized that I'm not normal. And what is normal? Normal to him is go out, get a job, work hard, get a pension, and be done with it. He's retired now, living off on an island somewhere, and it's perfect for him. He's got his pension. It'll always be in his bank. I make my living building websites on the internet on the side of a mountain as we homeschool our kids, and I work in my underwear. That is just not even close to being in my dad's previous frame of reference. It's not even there. And you can't say one is better than the other, although I prefer my life over railroading. He did what he had to. I work on the internets for a living. It's great, but I think it's different. Now, I'm just going to go to the Rob Carrick point. The reason Rob wants people talking about that is because that creates conflict, and that's what media does. I mean, to just say the two are different, that's boring. But to say, well, let's pit one against each other, generational warfare like we started, oh, now we've got controversy. Now we can talk about it. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the subject.
I think it's I agree with the awesome analogy that Jackson just threw out there. I just picture like he and his dad working beside each other, like juxtaposed. It's like Rocky on one side, and then there's like Jackson, like building super cool aesthetic websites. But yeah. So I think it's important, and I think what Rob's doing is important because for two reasons. I think, one, he's really trying to help millennials, and if we try to take the same path as our parents, we either have to do it really, really smart, or we're going to crash and burn. So in other words, if you just go to school for the sake of going to school, I mean, we've had this conversation before, it's going to end badly for you if you don't have sort of that financial luxury of scholarships or parental help. And if you just buy a house and are like, yeah, whatever, buy the most house I can afford, just like your parents maybe did, by the same sort of common sense advice your parents got, you're going to crash and burn. You're gonna be house poor forever till you're 65 or 70 if you look at the modern way of doing it. So I think he inadvertently maybe is trying to change that frame of reference. And I think the other thing Rob does really well is he's just trying to wake up the generation that's like kicking at millennials all the time, being like, shut up and work harder, go get a railway job. And he's trying to tell them, like, look, that won't work. There's not enough railway jobs, number one. And number two, they all have a university degree that they're in debt for, and they don't want to go work a railway job because no one told them how this whole money thing works. So I think he's doing good things. But you're right, Sandy, just sort of bemoaning, just constantly throwing the stats out there like, yeah, you're not going to be able to afford as many things on the same salary because wages have stagnated. It doesn't really serve any purpose, constructive purpose, in and of itself, I don't think. What do you figure, Chris?
I think that, Jackson's completely right about, sensationalism is something we love, and it's also something that, Kyle's a basketball fan just like I am, and they're constantly talking about, could Jordan beat LeBron? Who had it tougher? The 70s Lakers or the current, Warriors. It's like people love to take different generations and imagine what would happen if they were in the same sphere. And it's like it's a fun comparison, but at the same time it's not useful because at the same time, like, you play the game that's in front of you. That's what players in the NBA are doing, and that's really what we're doing all the time. It's like you can only play the cards that you're dealt. And so this is where I think that the problem is that, because I think that Rob is really trying and doing really well. He's talking to millennials, one of the few people that are in the mainstream media, but he's also trying to educate another generation, right? And so there's twofold. So you've got the kind of statement that they have it harder than we did, or they have it harder than you think they did, is really valuable for boomers to hear. But it's not valuable for millennials to hear. Because I really think that the way you frame a conversation is it really echoes in how people act. And when you have a financial literacy problem, or at least not a huge amount of financial literacy, and you constantly are hearing as a millennial, things are harder for you, things are tough, you can really build up a victim mentality. And like this is something that I talk about all the time in the arts, because the arts, especially the classical arts, are changing like crazy. Funding is decreasing, audiences are decreasing, and really having to reinvent ourselves as an industry. So you can, on one hand, sit on the side and you can say, I'm a victim, everything's changing, there's nothing I can do. Or you can say, exactly like Kyle was saying, look, I have the ability as a single artist, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, to connect to anybody in the world. I don't need big organizations to create those connections for me. I have so many more tools, but I need to use them in a completely unique way. So it's the negativity of that one argument, as useful it is for the boomers, I think it's really detrimental to having in the millennial brain, because it can drag you back. It can keep you from saying, I have so many tools, I have so many opportunities, and I have so much education. What am I going to do with it? Instead of, things are way tougher on me, I'll never gain wealth through the housing market, I'll never gain wealth this way, how will I ever get ahead, how will I ever build the stability that my parents built? And that should be the question that we're asking. How do we build stability in this new job market? It's not going to be through the same channels. So how do you do it? Not it can't be done, but how is it done?
Oh, that is so super awesome. Sandy's standard chime in line. I really love that so much. When you were talking about the victim mentality, and I don't know if you guys kind of remember this as being sort of irritating. In the past 5 years, kind of just post financial crisis, and in those kind of years immediately afterwards, people would talk about in this economy. And kind of on Main Street, and I don't mean journalists necessarily, although of course that got picked up in the way that you don't like Jackson. But you'd have regular conversations with people, and they would say, "Well, it's the economy," and you think, "Well, yeah, but it's the economy isn't one monolithic thing where as you're saying, Kyle, you can point out facts about it. Well, here's the job rate, and here's the whatever debt to income ratio or whatever. Those are true facts, but it doesn't say anything about your own particular set of circumstances and opportunities and values. You still have to navigate whatever those things happen to be. Yeah. There's nothing you can do to change them. There's no knob and dial that you can turn and say, well, I want the economy to look like this now, beep, boop, 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 and then it's done. You just have to deal with what you're dealing with. And I wish that was a conversation more often.
I love conversations about the economy, and I'm a little bit in over hype drive about this right now because the election and everyone, it's the economy, stupid, and everyone quotes, Bill Clinton, and I think the line actually originated with one of his advisors, James Carville, I think it was. But anyway, like it's insane. It's like talking about the middle class, and the middle class is everyone from earns $30,000 a year to $250,000 a year, and the economy. I mean, you open up an economics 101 book. Most people, that's not what they think of in the economy. The economy to most people is their job. Their job and maybe their commute to work and maybe their wife or brother's job. That's it. That is the whole economy to most people. So to say, like, the economy is doing bad, are you talking about the world economy? The world economy is doing actually superb relative to 50 or 60 years ago. Way more people can eat meat once a week than could 60 years ago. If you're looking at a world, are you talking about a Canadian economy? Because I can tell you the economy of Birtle, Manitoba is vastly different than Toronto, Ontario, which is vastly different from the Maritimes. So what are you referring to when you say the economy, right? And you make these broad statements about the economy for millennials and the economy for baby boomers, and now we're throwing in all sorts of like preconceived stereotypes that really have no relevance to anyone's situation.
Couldn't agree more. Add the housing market to that one. I'm adding.
Yes, that's part of it. Yeah.
The Canadian housing market. What?
It's actually just Toronto and Vancouver. That's it.
It's economy, housing market. It's local. It's about anyways, housing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Come to Gravenhurst and buy a house, and then talk about the housing market.
Yeah, the housing market. That's another one that just blows me away. I'm talking about millennials in the housing market. Anyway, we'll save that for another day, Chris. But maybe even that is an interesting sort of flashpoint in terms of, like, Chris, obviously with your career, you're likely going to live in major urban centers for as long as you are pursuing your career. What do you think about buying a house? Like, is it, we look at it differently than our parents did, do we not?
I'm going to kind of answer your question, but kind of not. Just because when you guys were talking, it just, these are all the things that we talk about when we talk about finance, right? And we talk about the market, we talk about the housing market, we talk about the economy, and I think you're exactly right. Like, my economy is my job and my specific industry. And the thing is that, like, I'm a big fan of, you can't control, like, why are you worrying about all the things you can't control? Like, I grew up on a farm, and this is like classic farm wisdom.
Yes,
it's like,
my favorite
you can be the best farmer in the world and never have a crop. Like, the weather happens. There's so much that's out of your control. So, like, you do the 10% that you can, and and stop worrying about the rest of it. It's like, I think that all of these topics are generally distractions, and I think that they're generally things that you can talk in circles about and avoid actually coming to the, like, real question of personal finance, which is, what life do I want to build? What life do I want to build? And then worry about how. But then you have like an into these different markets. So it's like, if I want to build a life that, if I want to build an urban life, then I have to figure out some way to solve an urban housing problem. If I want to build a life in the country, but my work is in cities, I need to figure out how to solve that problem. But it's ridiculous to try to jump into all of these issues for yourself. I think that like we all like to talk about the general issues and different issues that different people have because it's interesting to us. But on a personal level, like that's completely overwhelming for somebody that doesn't really care about this stuff and it isn't interested in this. What people are interested in is their own lives. And I don't mean that in a selfish way because I don't think that's just a millennial thing. I think, like Sandy said, boomers 40 years ago were trying to figure out how to make a life just the same way and with the tools that were in front of them. So it's like the question at the heart of it all is like what it is values. It is like, what are my values and how do I want to fulfill them with a financial kind of focus? How does money help me get this? What kind of investments do I need to make to have this? Not just, it's a completely distractionary kind of topic to talk about more and to talk about gaining wealth and to talk about solving the economy. And it's like, these are beyond my pay grade. Like, I don't know how to solve the economy. Are you kidding me? Like, I sing opera. That should be the last thing that I'm ever talking about. But I can talk about how if the grassroots of a business, like especially a business that's predicated on contractors and freelancers, is solid financially, on a personal basis, they're way more solid, the industry will be stronger. At least I think so. The industry can't help but be stronger because you have people that aren't desperately trying to fill jobs. You have a powerful grassroots. And in my specific industry, I think that would be really beneficial. Every industry is different. I don't know what's best for, other industries. And that's not really something that, there's too many things to think about. Like, it's just, that's a big difference between, that's between the millennials and other generations. We have so many options. And that's an amazing power and it's amazing privilege, but it's also completely overwhelming. And you have constantly this mantra in your head being like, you should be this, and you should be this, and you should be this. And it's like, you can't do all those things. It's impossible. Pick some things and know that you are responsible for building your life. You can't expect to sit around and have a company, get a job for 40 years and have a company provide your stability. Figure out how to find it. You are responsible for building that, and you have the tools to do it. It's just hard.
Yeah.
But not hard, impossible. Just hard. It takes a lot of work.
It's hard because the default is so strong. Because whatever, and not everybody's family default is, or your life circumstance default is the same. But the people that you ran into in your town when you were growing up, or what your parents said, or what your grandparents said, or your Uncle Bill, or whatever that is, it forms this paradigm that what you're saying, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this. And if you don't get a wake-up call from wherever that's going to come from to say, stop for 1 minute, just examine the things that you are defaulting to and think about what you really want. If everybody could just spend, it doesn't mean that it would, if you spend a lot of time navel gazing that suddenly you're going to be successful in your finances, but it's still a worthwhile activity. And if I had one general piece of advice for everybody, it would be spend some time navel gazing. That's useful. Seriously.
Yeah. It is useful.
And if you judge your success by a previous generation's metrics, or even, I guess, to put it in the reverse, by the current generation's metrics, if you're a boomer, like, if owning your own home is the definition of success, and certainly was at one point, because I know my dad tells me stories of, like, if you were a young man and you didn't own your own home, you were not fit to marry. Like, that was the, prevailing wisdom. Like, you could not financially support a family. You were not ready to go.
Yeah.
And so if you, judge yourself by that metric, one, you're going to make sort of inefficient, non-ideal choices for yourself, especially in an urban environment where, hey, don't take it from me. Take it from a neuroscientist named Preet Banerjee. You should be renting. And that's a hard concept for people to sort of wrap their head around because, again, the traditional success was own a home. And so you may never own a home and be quite successful and actually be better off personally in just the values and in a money sense, both. But then you have to throw away that other set of paradigms, and like Chris says, live according to your own values, solve your own problems in a modern context. Don't just say, well, housing values have went up, I'll never own a home.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more, because I'm right there right now. I've owned a home since, pretty much 8. My brother dropped out of high school, got a job at the airport, and bought his first home when he was 17, before he actually could. Like, for real. Home ownership has always been there, and now I've got a family, I got a wife and 4 kids, and we're renting. And it's funny, because we tell people we're renting, it's like, oh.
And you were in mortgages, and you were renting?
Yeah. And I was a mortgage broker for 7 years. But right now, I just looked at it and I said, this doesn't make sense for me to own a home. I like where we're at. I like the freedom. I don't fix things. I've got a broken toilet and a broken fireplace. My landlord's coming tomorrow morning to fix them. That is awesome for me. But again, it goes back to what you guys were saying about, I took a good hard look at my life and said, what do I want it to be? I didn't want to work as a mortgage broker out in an office 16 hours a day. I wanted to be a dad to my kids. I wanted to work at home. So I figured out a way that I could do that. We rent, and we love it. We're having the time of our life because we actually said, what do we want? And we actually went out and got it, and it's kind of fun.
I think that's the conversation that so often needs to be actually talked about more. More people hearing stories of why renting can be great and the benefits. People throw out this insane simplification of, when you're renting, you're throwing your money away. You're paying someone else's mortgage. Like, I just had a conversation with this yesterday with somebody being like, well, that's the stupidest thing you can do. And you're like, I'm investing in the fact that I can leave tomorrow and take a job in another country, and I have no strings. I'm investing in flexibility, which my career demands, and which my lifestyle, which I want. Like that's completely worth what I pay, which is a lot less than I would pay if I had a mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't judge yourself by a previous generation or anyone else's standards, and you'll be okay, whether you're a boomer or a millennial. I love how this turned into like a philosophical, like Zen advice session as much as like a finance one. Keep your numbers, economists. We've got lifestyle Zen on our side, baby. So, Chris, tell us a little more about Rags to Reasonable. Tell us a little more about Rags to Reasonable and where we can find you online.
You can find me at Rags to Reasonable, and I'm sorry, I probably pulled the conversation into a little bit of more of a Zen way. It really is what happens when you ask an artist to talk about finance. I love the numbers, but the thing that really fascinates me, and this things that I write about all the time, is how the personal side comes into it. And when you add people to money, it becomes a lot more complicated, but in a really beautiful way. And that money can be this really amazing tool for you to live a beautiful life on not less money. How to take a little and make a wonderful life, and not the idea that you always need more, and that's the thing that's going to get you there. It's that if you just take what you have and you learn to use it differently and efficiently, you can really make something really special. And that's what I believe, and that's what I write about. You can find me on my website at www.ragstoreasonable.com or on Facebook or Twitter, and yeah.
Check out Chris's site. I think it's one of the most unique personal finance sites out there. It's also Jackson Middleton, no less of an authority than he, has said that it's a beautiful-looking aesthetic.
It's a good-looking site.
It is. It is.
It's really well done. I love the images. I mean, it's very engaging. You've got a very engaging website, and it's not cluttered. It's very organized. Yeah.
So there you go. And it even looks good on one of those millennial smartphone things all you kids are on these days.
Tablet device.
So that's another episode in the hopper for Because Money. Thanks once again to Chris Enns, Jackson Middleton, and Sandy Martin. I'm Kyle Prevo. Have a nice week.
Thanks, Chris. Goodbye.